Welcome back, YouTube family. Before I begin this news story, remember to hit the notification button, like and subscribe to my channel to view relevant content. This is such a tragic story. Antonio Armstrong Jr., 23 years old, is sentenced to life in prison. The crime occurred on July 28, 2016, during the evening. Now, in the summer of 2016, his parents, Antonio Armstrong Sr. and Dawn Armstrong, both 42 years old young, were tragically injured while sleeping in their Bel Air, Texas home. Bel Air is near Houston. Both parents were harmed at close range at the head with Antonio Sr.'s .22 caliber pistol, and a pillow was found over their heads too. However, Antonio Sr. was carried out the home by EMT in critical condition to the hospital, where he passed away. In the 90s, his father was a popular American football linebacker. Antonio Sr. played for the Miami Dolphins, a Canadian football league, and later built a successful career in sports. Antonio Sr. was a co-owner of First Class Training Gym with his wife Dawn. He was a motivational speaker and personal trainer to athletes. They were happily married and were together most of the time. Shortly before the crimes, Antonio Jr. was not following his parents' rules. Text messages were found by law enforcement proving disagreements with his parents, like most teenagers. Now, Antonio Jr.'s parents were upset that he wasn't attending classes. He was kicked out. He was lying to them and taking drugs. They raised him in a home to have integrity, good morals, and values. After the crimes took place around 1 a.m., Antonio Jr. was the first person to discover his deceased parents. He made sure his younger sister Kyra was protected and safe. Although Antonio Jr. called the police, stating he saw an intruder in their home, they were skeptical of him. Antonio Jr. provided his feedback by sharing details of seeing an unknown person. He described the intruder as an African-American man over 6 feet wearing a face covering in his parents' room. Houston police did not believe him. He was a 16-year-old baby-faced teenager who was always a number one suspect. Reasons are the home security system was not disabled, and throughout the entire ordeal, when the police arrived, Antonio Jr. remained stoic, showing very little emotion. Well, we know that people show grief in various ways. He may have been in so much shock, but days later, Antonio Jr. was certainly crying a lot and trembling when he was being interviewed by the press. Antonio Jr. genuinely looked as if he was experiencing a lot of pain when speaking to reporters. But every door had sensors and motion detectors were inside the home. Plus, the home wasn't broken into and all areas were secured, and no one left the premises. Josh, the older brother, was called and arrived shortly after police. On the 911 call at 1:40, Antonio Jr. admitted that he had ringing in his ear, and he told the operator where his father's weapon was located. Then he whispered, "It's all my fault." Even though Antonio Jr. made this statement, no fingerprints were found on the weapon or anywhere in the crime scene. He did not have gunpowder residue on his hands, arms, or anywhere else on his body. Antonio Sr. and Dawn's blood were not found on him, nor on any additional clothing either. But a few shell casings were found in the parents' and Antonio Jr.'s room. And over the past 7 years, Antonio Armstrong Jr. was given permission to stay home while on house arrest. His grandmothers and several relatives provided $200,000 bond, and everyone faithfully believed in him. During the 7 years, Antonio Jr. continued to have a relationship with his girlfriend, Kate. She was always dedicated to Antonio Jr. They married and have a child together. In various interviews, his wife Kate expressed that Antonio Jr. has always been kind, demonstrated good character, and he's always been consistent with his behavior with her. Court trials. The jury deliberated for over a day regarding Antonio Jr.'s charges. All jury members could not agree with the charges due to the evidence and circumstances in this very complex case. The result was a mistrial in 2019. Afterwards, in 2022, at the second trial, 8 jurors believed he was not guilty, 4 jurors believed he was guilty. So the judge called a second mistrial. Next, the Harris County District Attorney's Office focused on prosecuting Antonio Jr. a third time. And then unanimously, all the jurors were all in one accord. But allegedly, the jurors were questioned prior. How could they have voted better? And it was more of a persuasive prompt to vote a particular way. Allegedly, this urge was from the court members, which resulted in a guilty verdict. 15 out of 15 jurors who found Antonio Jr. guilty. The phone call, the test fire weapon, and also him setting his house on fire. Now Antonio Jr. is convicted of 2 counts of capital M, and he has a life sentence. This year, forensics identified a small blood stain which was found on his shirt belonging to Antonio Sr. Plus, a ballistics report showed the weapon was fired from Antonio Jr.'s third-floor loft into the ceiling, and holes were in a blanket and pillow too. More evidence showing that he may be guilty. Antonio Jr. stated that the weapon was fired weeks prior to the crime. He said that 2 to 3 weeks before, he was showing off in front of friends and the weapon went off in his room. Interestingly enough, law enforcement investigated and found that it was a more recent incident. When I saw the documentary on Antonio Jr. pertaining to the night when his parents were tragically deceased, I did not believe Antonio Jr. could have done this cold-blooded crime. I haven't heard much negative feedback about Antonio Sr. and Dawn Armstrong, except I'll tell you later. According to news reports, interviews, and with their relatives and friends, they were loving to Antonio Jr. and his sister. They were loving to all of their kids, but it included firm rules. Antonio Jr.'s grandmother shared that both parents weren't overly strict with him. They just wanted him to improve himself and excel academically. Honestly, I always believed evidence would show that Josh was an unaliver. Josh is the oldest child. He's Dawn's first biological son. Although he's not Antonio Armstrong Sr.'s son, he was always treated the same as Antonio Jr. and their daughter Kyra, who was 12 years old at the time. I watched the documentary a second time. I completely forgot that a family friend named Maxine Adams made jaw-dropping statements about Antonio Sr. While on the witness stand, Maxine Adams blatantly said that Antonio Sr. and her husband were involved heavily in a woman's exploitation ring for workers. In her words, criminals were after them and threatened to retaliate against them. She made official statements to police as well, providing names, phone numbers, and intricate details. Because of Ms. Adams' statements, Antonio Jr.'s charges were initially dropped. Police said Maxine Adams' statements were not found conclusive. Another twist. Right after the crimes, the first-class training gym that they owned was broken into. And after hearing the jury was conflicted twice, the main aspect of Antonio Jr.'s firing of his weapon in his room, knowing the location of his dad's weapon, not having a lot of blood or gunpowder or weapon powder on him, saying it's all my fault, plus the home security system was intact, made me very skeptical. Even his parents called him a bold-faced liar. But I would have liked to know more about Maxine Adams' theory and if an investigation was really made. I'm intrigued about Josh, the older brother, and his relationship with his parents too. I know Josh had mental problems for over 3 years prior to the crime. He is diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he has demonstrated very bizarre behavior for several years due to his mental illness. His sister Kyra stated Josh believed his parents loved his siblings more. And after the crime, Josh was completely obsessed with the tragedy and he had to be placed in the hospital. Again, Josh lives about a block away from his parents' house. Is Josh the intruder? Overall, I'm disheartened knowing these parents instilled morals and values in their children, provided a loving and stable home, which resulted in such a horrible ending. Did the Armstrongs create a monster, or is Antonio Jr. truly innocent? What are your thoughts? Please leave your comments below. I would love to hear from all of you. And my condolences to the family. May they rest in peace. And remember to hit the notification button, like and subscribe to my channel. Thanks a million and stay safe wherever you are.